Helsa, and greetings to all you who are tuning in to tonight's show. Welcome to the Focus Lines radio show. I am your host, Bolt Odinsson. I am privileged to have the opportunity to speak with you again tonight. We have been pretty active here lately at Folk FM. We've had a lot of individuals contact us here recently wanting to get more involved within the radio show, the production side of things, which is pretty exciting. We had a new show kick off this last week. We have another show up and coming, hopefully. I have many guest speakers lined up wanting to get on the air and speak about a particular topic. And this is the reason why we created this radio show, is for focused individuals wanting to speak about educating themselves and sharing research and just sharing knowledge and communicating. I am confident now to say we have hundreds of listeners all over the world and the States. So these things are definitely an exciting time to be involved in our faith, and I'm eager to see what the rest of this year holds. Tonight, our guest speaker is Folcweard Lárġyfa, speaking about a few things: fate, orlog, weird, not to mention several things that he has going on project-wise, ongoing and past. So let's get him on. Let's see if we can get him on the line here.
Halate.
Helsa Kinsman, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
That sounds pretty good. You are on the Focus Alliance radio show, and I appreciate you taking the time and effort to have you come on the radio show and talk about some things that we are interested in topic-wise. And hopefully we can speak about these topics and gain a little bit more knowledge in the controversial debate on some of these things. I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak about yourself and give yourself a little intro into our show. This is your first time on, so I'd like to have you tell the listeners about everything that you got going on and all the projects during and the past. So go ahead and speak about yourself and tell us what's going on with you over there.
All right, sure. But first thing, I just want to say, thank you for having me on. This is a pleasure. To introduce myself, I'm Folcweard Lárġyfa. I'm the founder of, researcher, Old English translator, and creator for the Fritzstead, which is an educational platform that focuses on rebuilding our native Germanic culture, more specifically through the lens of Folksida, which is a pan-Germanic Anglo-Saxon tribal expression of Settianism. As a translator and a lover of language, I oftentimes employ attested and reconstructed Old English. I'm a language guy. I really love language and delving into that. I've previously served as the Neurona Society's co-director, membership coordinator, projects coordinator, and de facto Telegram support guy. Now, as far as the Neurona Society, I'm still a proud member. But as far as like any other side of my, professional life, as far as, work, so folks, just kind of get a gist of, who I am and how I live my life. I've been in both the lower and upper levels of the work environment. I've been a paint contractor for 30 years. My father was a paint contractor. I come from a blue collar family. But through education, I've also taught high school English in the public school system. So I've tried to be well-rounded and see various aspects of life. And so, yeah, that pretty much just sums up who I am and, what I do.
You said you talk about the Old English translator, and you speak it pretty well, if I'm not mistaken, right? It's not fluent, you would say, but you can translate and speak it pretty easily, correct?
Correct. Yeah, when you're dealing with language, there's definitely many levels. Like conversational is a far cry from being able to read it. And then translating it is also different from reading it. And, my strengths, I would say, would be I can read it and I can translate it.
I've never had any success learning another language. I've learned some catchphrases with Old Norse and stuff of that nature, and I'm not sure if my pronunciation is correct. There's a lot of vowels. Icelandic and Old Norse is the closest to one another, and the only difference is there's one has more vowels than the other, and the pronunciation of such vowels, and it gets a little confusing. But Icelandic is the closest to Old Norse. And why did you choose Old English? And the book that you've put out as well, which we'll get into a little bit later on, it's based on the customs and the ideology is Anglo-Saxon as well. So what made you choose to learn Old English?
Well, first, let me back up. And yes, Icelandic is the closest to Old Norse, but there are a lot of differences. And so some people do get confused when they're trying to learn Old Norse by relying too heavily on the Icelandic. But that being said, if you're going to learn Old Norse, then Icelandic is a good route. A lot of the pronunciations are completely different, like a lot of the V's that people say are actually, according to Old Norse, should be pronounced with a W. Well, that's just something that you got my mind hooked on when you're talking. So I wanted to say that,
Right.
And I could go on and on, but I don't want to rabbit trail or anything like that. But as far as the Old English goes, it has to do with my faith, my religious belief, and that comes directly from my heritage, my family lines, that it's almost as if like that ancestral blood memory was calling. And, when you look into a person's faith, what I was doing was I was like, well, what is the faith of my family line? And
you have a heavy English heritage, correct?
Well, DNA wise, I'm about half English. Yes. And, there's a few twists and turns in my father's line, like we all have. But ultimately, long story short, to save everyone time, yes, that it was Anglo-Saxon. And so I was like, okay, I understand Old Norse. It's so important to respect Old Norse and to look into Old Norse, and I want people to know that. But when it comes to your faith, I believe you should follow the faith of your father's line, because we've always been a patrilineal folk, and the Anglo-Saxon was just everywhere in my father's line, and it was part of me was wanting to know the faith more, but combined with knowing my ancestors more, knowing my family line, the men and women that came before me. And so I'm like, what language did they speak? What faith did they practice? What culture did they have? And it was, and all the signs and all the evidence kept pointing back to Anglo-Saxon. And so I'm like, okay, well, even though I have a love for Old Norse and I see the value in it when it comes to modern day heathendom, my line is more closer to Anglo-Saxon. So let me look at that and see where it takes me.
Well, and this is one of the main reasons why I think that your work is so important, and I support it in such a way because, yes, everybody understands that the origin of our faith is Norse and Germanic, right? But our ancestors, they've migrated, they've conquered, they've traveled, and they've been successful in regions of the world. And some of those areas that they were highly successful in is England, the northern Europe. Their travels are vast, all the way to Constantinople. Okay,
right.
So along the way, they've adopted and interpreted into their doctrine Celtic, English, and other Slavic. So I understand the origin of our faith is Germanic and Norse, right? But the other cultures and heritage, if we're going to be adopting and embracing a culture and heritage, then we need not to be ignorant in the terms that there are other cultures and heritage inside of our faith, and they're folkish cultures, right? So
Yes.
I think that's very important to what you're doing, and there's a lot of information with Norse and Germanic, a lot of literature and stories and sagas and information revolving around such environment. But to introduce the Anglo-Saxon side of our faith, we need more of it, in my opinion. And that's why I support what you're doing so much, and wanted you to come on the show, because a lot of people don't know. Like, if I was to say theodism, right? So Folksita is Anglo-Saxon. Theodism is also Anglo-Saxon. And they have a lot of the same customs as well. So I think it's very important what you're doing, and I completely support it. So what else can you tell me, and what else can you tell us about some of the other projects? You've been working with the Norrøn Society as well, correct? What projects have you done with them?
Well, as you know, the X projects coordinator, I kind of had my hands in pretty much everything. And that's not saying that I get, full credit with everything they've done. No, I'm just saying that I've worked with,
Right. Supported, helped
whether
out with their projects.
supporting, helping out, assisting,
Research,
working
I'm
with,
assuming research, right?
research. Yes, because of course when you're doing research, there's a lot of back and forth conversations here or there, that all go into it. Like one of the main ones, and it was the Voluspa translation, and that's a project that was began by several folks, and it was we wanted to produce a translation of the Voluspa, that was translated accurately by heathens, but that's not something I'm going to take credit for. In no way, shape, or form. A good friend of mine, Keith Osgood, thankfully so, he is the Old Norse expert that I go to even for Old Norse stuff, and he took over the project and then made it his own. And
I've spoken with Keith, and he's actually coming on to the Folkish Alliance radio show a little bit later on down in the months. So I'm eager to see have him on and talk about what you were just talking about, his translation of the Voluspa. So
yeah, you're going to enjoy that. So I definitely heavily support and promote his work. The Avenruner book 2 that just came out by the Norrøn Society, I helped with some translations, and there's a few of them in there that I translated.
You talking about the 18 tenets of the Setian path?
Oh no, that's actually came out before the Avenruner second book. But I definitely helped in write a lot of the commentary under the 18 tenets.
Right.
And so I definitely was there and one of the contributors that fleshed things out and kind of made that a reality. Yeah. Of course, there's not just me,
Right.
But
a supportive, a collaborative effort, I guess, would say.
Correct. Definitely so. But as far as, like I did a lot of the writing on the commentary part, or the exposition under each tenets, if you will.
Right. One of the tenets, number 15, actually deals with fatalism, and we're actually going to get into that a little bit later on the show as well. But let's get on to, speaking of books, you wrote a book, right? The Loyalty Writings. And those of you who have not had the opportunity to, and your newest edition just came out, is that correct?
Yes.
So I have the first edition, and you've just came out with a second one. So what is the difference between the two editions? What did you add? Did you take anything out?
Well, actually, I'd put out the third edition. You have the first.
Oh, I have the first. So I'm behind in the schedule here.
Yes. Basically, anybody who publishes any book, there's always little tiny things that most people don't notice, but the writer does. So I cleaned up a few little, grammatical things here or there. I might have looked at a sentence and said I could have worded that a little bit better. And so I kind of changed those things. But as far as most people are concerned, there's the first edition and the third edition are closer in resemblance as opposed to the second edition. What I basically did, to long story short, is I added the setting and tenets to the end.
Right.
Because I definitely, believe in those tenets. And I think that's the way forward for, traditional heathendom, if you will.
Right.
So I wanted to include that because, the book focuses on one specific thew, loyalty,
right.
But I wanted to include at the end a good theological foundation. Regardless of what, things may, be agreed upon or disagreed upon, I really wanted to include the setting and tenets because that ultimately lays the foundation for, the mindset of what our ancestors believed in. And then it also kind of, focuses things a little bit more that separates us. Like one of the things why I wanted to include it is because it's like, you say the word heathen, and today, anybody who has explored heathenry online, that could mean a million things to a million different people. So basically I wanted to include that because it kind of separates, things and makes things more clear. So it's one of those things where whether you agree or disagree, it's still bringing clarity. And that's why I thought the third edition was very important to bring clarity.
Right. So the book is an amazing book. I read it. I loved it. And it refers around, as you said, loyalty and the ripple effect, the different layers of loyalty to one when walking our faith. It doesn't matter if you call yourself a Setian or an Odinist or a Sachuar. These ring true to any individual walking this northern path, right? And
Correct.
the first one you have, and I can't really argue with this one, it has self, right? You got to work on yourself. You have to put yourself in a position, strength in the physical form, the mind frame. You have to be strong as an individual before you're able to even help anybody else. Would you agree with that?
Oh, definitely. That's why it's the first. You have to
Right.
have that foundation of doing right, of thinking right.
So your most attention to being loyal in our faith is to first be loyal to yourself.
Correct. Now, I do want to say something here is that in our post hippieized world, for lack of a better term, it's one of those things where it's like, let me do what I want to do. You have to respect me. You have to, give me the freedom. Don't oppress me. I can do whatever I want because I'm my own individual. On a brief side tangent, that ultimately that is, what I would consider satanic. Okay. Now we're not going to get into that right now, but that could be for a later discussion, because our ancestors were folk minded. Now, folk minded does not mean in any way, shape, or form that you cannot be an individual. It does not mean that you cannot have your own creative expression. All it means is that when you act, you think to yourself, how will that affect my spouse, or how will that affect my siblings or my parents or my friends, those closest to me, my kindred, because you don't want to, because you could do something with the best of intentions, but it could have rippling effects that could hurt everybody around you.
Right. The ones that are close to you. Yes, absolutely.
that's what folk-minded is. And so when you think I have to be loyal to myself first, it's within the context of you have to have a foundation of faith. You have to have certain thews that are grounded, certain morals, certain values.
Now,
And
explain what a thew is to our audience. Some
it's
people don't really know the Theodish winds and thews. But if I'm not mistaken, the thews are guiding principles. If I'm not mistaken, correct?
The simplest way to put it is a thew is right action.
And a win is character traits, more like, correct?
Well, I'll continue on the thews. The thews are right action. It's kind of like if you steal a cookie and you're a kid and your mother, gets on to you. Don't lie to her. Just say, "Sorry, Mama, I stole the cookie."
Right. Be honest and truthful. Right.
It's just one of those things. It's just right action. It's one of those things where a lot of people just say it's common sense, but unfortunately, today a lot of those things are not common sense.
Unfortunately, yes.
So it's kind of like you just do what's right. What's right. You don't sit there if you're married and you just spin a bunch of lies to your wife. That that's wrong. Don't do that. So that in that sense, the thew would be honesty.
Right.
Just be honest. You don't intentionally screw people over.
Right. And you said your actions have a ripple effect, causing actions directly or indirectly to those who are closest to you. And that's the second level of loyalty, is to your faith, to your family, right? And you have self, family, friend, faith, and folk, the 5 layers. Now,
yes.
Where would you put kindred, right? Your kindred. Would that be friend or faith?
To be honest, it could be 3rd, 4th, and 5th. It all depends on each kindred's how far does that kindred go into accepting somebody into their kindred to be called part of that kindred?
Well, because in my kindred, the Fetterfolk Hearth, there are some kinsmen in my kindred who I actually consider family, because we've been together so long. We've faced adversities, we've faced challenges, we've had our laughter and our tears, and they've grown into a family member for me. Now, not every single member of my kindred, I don't have the same bond and the same kinship with every individual of the kindred. Our kindred is is on the rather large side, and some of these individuals have been with me from the very beginning, right? And some are recently new into the kindred. So our bond and our kinship, the level of loyalty that I have with them is somewhat more or less than those who've been there from the very beginning.
Which that is normal. That's natural.
Right.
So you ultimately cannot say a kindred fits into any of these circles. It's the individual within the kindred that fits into those circles. Like, let's just say you take me, for example. Okay. I show up at one of your events and you've been gracious enough to invite me and accept me. And I show up and I'm like, oh man, this is great. Thank you. But ultimately, I am there because I am of the same faith.
Right.
But in your heart and in your mind, and in my heart and my mind, we're looking at each other and going, okay, how's this going to work?
Right.
Is it going to work?
We
don't know.
Right.
But then time passes, and then guess what? Hey, we become friends. So
Right.
we move up a circle.
Right.
And then more time passes. And if, everything works out great, which is what I would hope, which is what you would hope, guess what? We moved into the circle of family.
Right. Absolutely. And I remember you've been around now for a year almost. I think we met each other for the first time in Brooklyn, Texas, down south for Swain, right? And Swain is coming up now for this year, so that'll be 1 year, right? So we've been several events. We've shared a lot of moments, met each other's families, and we are on the process of going through the different levels of loyalty right now, currently. So, is there? You said that we have to pay attention, show attention, and show a level of loyalty for. And you said the most loyalty, and we struggle with balance in our faith. It's always important to be balanced in all things. Correct?
Very much so, 100%.
So if we're trying to maintain a balance, right, through all these levels of loyalty, if we're trying to maintain balance, then it seems like it's almost impossible to maintain balance if you're showing the most attention and the most loyalty to oneself, and then your family, and then your friends. So the more you go down line, the less level of loyalty you have, right? So it's almost impossible to maintain the balance.
No, well, I say yes and no to what you're saying. The loyalty to yourself is not something that it's not something that you show. It's like, if I show up to your event, I'm not sitting there and hindering myself in a conversation with you by thinking, okay, am I being honorable? Okay, am I being honest? Okay, am I being, that's something that just comes out naturally. So you don't think about that. That's something, at an event, on your own in your private life while you're working or whatever you're doing. That's when you think about those things. Okay.
So I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying when you're at an event, or maybe it's not an event, maybe it's just you're talking to somebody at an average moment in your life. You're not consciously thinking about those concentric circles. All you're trying to do, and this builds off the first concentric circle, you're just trying to do right.
Right.
So when I'm talking to you at an event, or if I'm talking to somebody else, if I happen to meet at Walmart, all I'm trying to do is just be a nice guy. Am I
act accordingly?
Nice?
Yeah, accordingly
to the situation.
Yeah, present yourself with the foundations of our faith.
Exactly. Be professional. I'm not going to sit there and just go to Walmart and just start cussing up a storm, or if I'm with my wife, let's say, and we're pushing a shopping cart down an aisle, I'm not going to sit there and just be talking about our problems, because I'm thinking, well, someone else might hear. So I hold that back. It's just acting accordingly, being a decent person.
What about the everybody? It takes energy. It takes strength of will to be loyal in this caste system, right?
It's hard. It's very hard.
It's very it takes energy from the individual. So my question to you is, because every individual, every being, every entity has a spiritual essence, a spiritual strength, right, to them.
Yes.
So what if an individual lacks in spiritual strength, their spiritual essence, and they aren't able to maintain the level of loyalty all the way down this chain of command, right, in the five levels? So the strength of an individual's spiritual essence also comes into play, and could inhibit an individual from reaching the fifth layer, the fourth level, the third layer, correct?
Yes, very much so. There are a lot of people who don't have the mental capacity or the emotional capacity to conduct themselves properly, because we live in a society today where you turn on the TV, you turn on the radio, you talk to the average, John and Jane Doe, and for the most part, everything that they are pushing and everything that they are everything that you hear is not productive. It's counterintuitive. It's pushing you down. It's pushing you away from everything that is right. Everything is geared towards destroying us. And so there's a lot of weak-minded individuals that will naturally go that route. But the problem is you don't want to just put somebody down. You don't want to hurt their feelings. It's like, seriously, and I know people say, don't worry about the snowflakes. Well, no, to a certain degree we do. You want to bring people home.
Well,
you want to bring them to a sense of family, and so you have to work with them.
Well, a majority of
give them guidance and give them instruction and give them teaching and give them help and and sometimes we just need to love people,
right?
Because sometimes people just don't know how to love or never experience love, and love can come in many different forms. Even if it's just, hey, I'm going to shake your hand, I'm going to smile, and I'm going to say, oh, that was interesting, and you show interest. That alone could change somebody's life. And that's how we need to be, because there's a lot of people that are looking, but they don't know they're looking. They're wanting, but they don't know they're wanting. And it takes it's kind of like those things where you say, if you know, you know. Well, those people who know need to be patient and help our folk, because even if they may lash out at you or they may not be too bright, who cares? They're still our folk, and there's still some good things that could come from them, and everybody can play a part and do something beneficial, and that's where the true leaders come in, where we have to, go that extra mile to help people.
A lot of people lack in the spiritual strength, but because they lack in spiritual strength, it's more along the lines of being not educated, not having the knowledge of our faith, and that's where you're pointing to. It comes down to the leaders of our faith and educating these individuals so that they might be able to work and strengthen their spiritual essence as well as their knowledge in our faith, so they can walk truly, correctly, and know the difference. It's one thing to do something wrong when you didn't know anything about it, but another to do something wrong or fall short whenever you knew better and had the knowledge to back it up, right?
Exactly.
So we've talked about the levels of loyalty, your book, and it works and goes right into some of the other things that we want to talk about tonight. And they work so well together. It's like a chain reaction, right? The levels of loyalty that you have to be consistent and be knowledgeable of, and to have recognition of it. But fate and Orlog and weird all come in together as well, because whenever you're constantly trying to maintain the balance between all these loyalties, you have to understand that fate and Orlog and your weird come into direct play with these things, right? So
yes.
We're going to talk about fate first, okay? And it's the idea, the philosophical idea explaining the interaction of time and human activity within the perspective of or recognized cosmic order, which is understood in the belief and leans toward predestination, belief in a force that fate remains beyond the realm of normal human control, consisting of circumstances that are unavoidable and small actions which often result in consequences and or benefits. These are described as acts of destiny, which can only be described as possibly supernatural or divine intervention. Even in the very act of attempting to avoid a fated outcome can be described as sufficient enough to create the necessary environment that will result in the fate being caused to occur anyways. So it's almost there's no way to escape fate. Fate, therefore, can only be a form of predestination, and its effect, for good or ill, is unavoidable by both gods and mortals alike. So in our faith fate is represented with three goddesses consisting of three aspects known collectively as the Norns. Okay? So I know I said something in here that you're chomping at the bit to you're chomping at the bit to comment on, right? And I can guarantee you what it was is when I said small actions which often can result and can be altered, in my opinion, right? So let me ask you a question. In regards to fate, do we as individuals have any control at all, even the small details of our thread? Do we have any control at all? Or are we completely helpless living our life to a predestination fate?
We do have a certain amount of control, yes, but not
Because
all.
this is where it's debated. Do we have control or do we not have control? And if so, if we do not have control, then doesn't matter if we live up to our 9 noble virtues, or live the Assyrian Code of 9, or refrain from the vices.
I will say this: we do have some control, but not all control. Okay. Now the attitude, the mindset of, well, if we have no control of fate, then what's it matter? I'm just going to do anything that I want.
Exactly.
Well, ultimately, that pretty much determines your position, because we are a faith of we are our deeds. We are a faith of continuing to try. We are a faith of, striving for better. And so if you actually give up, where does that place you? Pretty darn low. And that's not a good thing. But to go back to what you're saying about fate, there's many sources that we have that talks about fate. And one of the foundational things about fate is that if something is fated, we have no control over it. But there's nothing that specifically says, now, of course, we can debate this, mind you, but there's nothing in my mind that specifically says 100% every single thing is fated, as in every single action or every single thought is fated. That's not necessarily true. There are just a lot of things that are fated, and those things, you don't know what all is fated and what's not. But those that are, yes, you have no control over it. And that's a simple thing to comprehend if you look at how life works. You could be driving down the road. You could be checking your mirrors every 3 seconds and putting your hands on 10 and 2 and doing, and not looking at your phone, not listening to the radio. You're focused. But then all of a sudden, guess what? Somebody veers into your lane, and you got a cliff on one side, you got a wall on the other side. What are you going to do? At the end of the day, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. All you can do is react to it the best that you know how. That doesn't mean you have no free will. It just means your choices are severely limited at that particular point in time.
It's just hard for me to wrap around the concept that I have no control. I lean toward the fact that I can delay, maybe manipulate the small details of my life, even though I recognize that my fate is set. But how I arrive there is, and how I present myself along the way, I feel like I have that control.
Well, that's what we're taught.
Right.
That's the American way, is it not?
Yeah, well. And not only American, but I'm a Texan too, so it's even double worse. So, and we talk about fate, and then we talk about Orlog and Weird, and they play so well with each other, and then they play so well with the fact that we talk about the levels of loyalty you have, right? So Orlog and Weird, right, is one. If one was to get involved with the community or kindred, they would need to understand that and the concepts of weird and orlog. And as we were talking about earlier, everything you do reflects on not only yourself as well as those who are very close to you, family, but it also reflects and affects directly or indirectly the kindred that you're sworn to possibly, or the community you're involved with as a whole. From the way you talk to the way you carry yourself, that your actions, every one of your actions reflects on every individual of the hearth or community, some directly, as I said, and some indirectly. Depending on the action and the bond you have with one another, like we were saying earlier. When you dedicate yourself and you swear an oath to anything, you have to remember and understand that you're tying your threads of your weird to the other oath-sworn members of the kindred community, or even, as you said, wife, children, and stuff of that nature. This is not something that one should take lightly. And then you enter into the whole aspect with weird, right? And I love this concept of weird because you can kind of see the diagram. You can think of yourself, and there's 1,000 different threads coming from your body, right? Going out into all these and having a direct tie with many, many individuals. These threads are tied to other oath-sworn members of your kindred, your family, and other things of that nature. Everything you do creates a vibration. These vibrations, no matter how minute, can be felt throughout the web by every individual attached, and to those who are attached to them, and more indirectly. So weird is drawn from the layers of deeds or orlog that an individual has created for themselves. Would you not agree to that?
I would agree to a point.
Okay, so where does it differ in your eyes?
Well,
it may be just the wordage I'm using, because sometimes this is a great barrier sometimes in the wordage. With people how to present the material, the correct wordage that they use can confuse people sometimes.
A lot of the time. Okay, you can walk out onto your front porch and you can look at a spider web, and you can look at it, as in like the macro, and it's just a big, beautiful thing shining in the morning sunlight. It's gorgeous. And then you look at it individually, and it's one single strand that wraps around another single strand that in turn wraps another single strand, and so on and so forth. You have that spider in the middle, and let's just say you barely tap on something at the far end. That sends a ripple. That's one of your actions, okay? And that sends a ripple down the thread, and then it connects to another thread or two or three, and continues to send ripples down those threads all the way down into the middle. That doesn't change the course of the threads. It doesn't change the course of the entire web. All of that is still there. It's still active. It's still present. It's still a physical reality that you're not changing when you lightly touch something, right? But it's still actions that affect certain things. What are the effects? Well, there you have that spider right there in the middle that says, hey, somebody's touching something over there. Let me go look at it.
Right, absolutely.
And that spider could rush up and miss or hit, whatever, Earlier, you talked about how it's tied in with the three fates, the three norns,
the three norns, yes. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I definitely want to pop you with a question in a second.
Well, you're talking about, weird and orle, okay? Old Norse is orlog, and Old English is orle, same word.
Right.
Okay. They each have a meaning. You have the three sisters. You have weird, which is fate, or that which will be. That's not going to change. What that will be, it's going to happen. Then you have Weradende, or other peoples might say Verdandi, or Verdandi.
Yeah, Verdandi.
That is becoming, or that which is happening. And then you have Shield, or some might know it as
Scold. Yeah, scold.
Right. That is debt, obligation, that which is owed. So you have those three, weird, or to say it in, the unpronounced modern English, weird. That is, okay, this is what's going to happen. Then you have where then they, this is now, this is what you're doing. You're doing stuff and it's making an effect. It's happening now. And then at the end of your life, when everything you've done, well, you've done it. You can't change anything. You're dead. That's shield or scold. And that is your debt, your obligation. That's when you're like, okay, you've done it. You're over with. Good or bad, you're going to the hell thing. You're going to stand before judgment. But then you've mentioned urlog or orle. All that means is which means original or primal, and then lai, which is like law. So It's the original law. And law comes from that which is laid down. And we see that in the common expression today, I'm laying down the law.
Right. So,
it's basically weird and orle are synonyms for each other. That which will happen. Why? Because it was laid down. It was pre-established.
Right. So I'm glad you brought up the Norns. Okay. And so let me hit you up with this. The Norns have control of the fate of not only man alike, but gods themselves as well.
Correct.
So they weave the threads and the weavers of the fate and all that happens in the world, the path of men and the gods themselves. So who has more control, right? Who's more powerful, the gods and goddesses or the Norns? Because the Norns have control over the fate of all. So who's really in control there? Who's more powerful in your opinion?
Without a doubt, the Norns are more powerful than the gods.
So is the Norns
subjected? The gods are subjected to fate no different than we are. Look at the story of Balde. When you had Freya go into everything on Earth trying to,
So there's so many stories in the lore. The story about with Frigga going to all the objects and the individuals of the worlds and getting to swear an oath to protect her son Balder, but in the end, Balder was killed through treachery and conniving schemes through Loki himself. So even her, knowing all things, still wasn't able to escape fate. Odin himself traveled the worlds, dedicated his life to gain the knowledge and wisdom to prevent, hopefully, Ragnarok and save his family and his kinsmen and women. But he too, even though he was as strong and powerful, the creator, one of the creators, him too was subject to fate himself. So it's there was an individual who asked me this question: is the gods and goddesses really even gods and goddesses at all? Because they lack the power of the Norns themselves. And Mike, I mean, he has a point, but you definitely can explain the answer that the gods and goddesses are, in fact, gods and goddesses, and they too are powerful. I mean, look at all the things that Odin and Vili and Ve, the creator of mankind, gave the owned and the spirit, the soul. So it's just a lot of these questions in our positions, you and I, educators, one would say, it's difficult to have all the answers and to present it in a way for the individual to understand. You have to the presentation has to be there as well with the knowledge, so the individual can understand.
Well, the first thing that people need to understand is that nobody has all the answers.
Well, no, don't. Some people, I've heard different.
Well, if somebody says that they have all the answers,
I'm not going to throw out any names, or that's not what I do here on the show. I try to unite, not divide. But I have I've heard some things going around in the rumor mill, that there are some all-knowing people out there, unfortunately.
And all I can say is run.
Or run from them. Yeah.
But no, seriously, when we look at the gods and goddesses, they are gods and goddesses. Now we could break that down and get into semantics and nitpick this, that, and the other. And what does it mean to constitute a god? They are so far above us and so far ahead of us. They are our creators. I'm going to call them gods and goddesses. Yes, they are. Now, does that mean I'm going to call the Jotuns gods and goddesses? No, because they're the enemies of the gods and therefore enemies of us. So I'm not going to call them gods and goddesses. But the gods and goddesses have an agenda, no different than us humans have an agenda. We're fallible just like they are fallible. But when you want to look at the level of difference, it's like, okay, you have a small child that's in diapers. You are a full-grown adult. Look at the difference. You're not sitting here, trying to control your little 1-year-old or 2-year-old. But technically, in a sense, you guide them because you're so far above them, so it appears as if you're controlling them. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But even in that situation, the parent is still doing the best that he or she can, and they may make mistakes. And yeah, they're going to. Well, it's no different than the gods. The gods are going to try their best in their understanding, and they're going to do the best they can. They're going to succeed much more than we will, but they'll make their mistakes too, because they're not infallible. This is not a Semitic religion where they're all perfect and all knowing. But then you go above them, because being that we're still talking about fate, right?
Right.
And
well,
so
we're talking fate, weird, Orlog. They're so closely knit
Right.
that you can talk.
So-
we can jump back and forth with all three of them and not lose a
Right.
beat.
So when you go to the Norns, they are that much more above the gods. Okay. But I'll say this. Okay. Now, even above the Norns, you have the primeval elements, that which was before there even was a was, the original,
The Assembla, Ymir, those aspects of our faith. That's where you're going with that, correct?
those aspects plus before. It's kind of like you have to look at gravity like a neutral force. Fate is like gravity. It's a neutral force. It is what it is. And it creates a need when a need is needed. And so one could look at the Norns and be like, they're powerful much more than the gods because they know and they understand. But what do they know and understand? They understand the primal element of that which is, and that which always was, and that which always will be. And now we could nitpick here and say that some will say, well, they create the fate. Well, maybe not. Maybe they're just interpret that which is. They're the speakers for that neutral force that says, hey, this is what's going to happen. I'm not choosing it, but I'm telling you like it is. And you have the gods that are saying, I believe you, but I still have my own mind, and I'm going to try my hardest to change it. And then extension, us way down here, we'll do the same thing.
We talked about the delivery, being able to deliver the message for somebody to understand what you're trying to teach them or educate them in a way, right?
Right.
And there's so many ways to look at it when looking at the definition of weird and Orlog, and it was best described to me. This is when it clicked to me. Whenever somebody told me that weird can be is basically defined as your past as it is actively taking place in your present, right? And then Orlog, which is your past deeds as they are waiting to manifest themselves into your present. So your weird is your present, and your Orlog is everything that you've built up, all your deeds that are waiting to manifest themselves into enact their vengeance or their benefits, whatever it might be, right? So once someone described that to me in that manner, it just clicked, and I understood it from there on out. So the presentation and the message that is delivered is very important. And that's one of the things that we, as I said, me and you, Robert, Mark Purrier, a lot of these individuals who aren't in the place of educating others of our faith, not only do we need to, we can't just show them and point them in the right direction majority of the time. You can't just always give them a source or a book to read and to point them in the direction and hope the best for them. Sometimes we have to take a more direct approach. And because we have the technology we do, it makes it more convenient for us to reach more people, like this radio show right here, giving us an opportunity to come on and to speak about a specific topic and to make sure that we are able to deliver the message adequately to all ranges of learnings. So this is very important, and I really appreciate you coming on to the show and talking about these topics and your book in general and all the things that you're doing for us as a faith. Research, knowledge. We've known each other for, as I said, for a year now. We've grown pretty close as friends. We have a lot of way to go still, as in the layers of our loyalty to one another. But I see bright horizons, not only for our relationship, but for the things that you have going on, all the projects, all the things that you're doing to help reach out and to make a connection with the many aspects of our faith. And it's just an amazing to see, and it's amazing to be a part of it, to, help support you in any way I can. It's just I say this all the time, it's just so exciting to be involved with our faith right now because there's so much things going on. But it's just an amazing time. So what else you got for us? Is there anything that you want to add? We're coming up on an hour, so we have about 5 minutes left. And is there anything that you want to speak on any topic that we passed up earlier in our show that you want to throw a little bit more insight on?
Well, yeah, actually, I hope this doesn't push it too far, but I just want to continue just a little bit more on the faith subject.
Okay.
Now, you did mention, that we can't just throw sources out there and expect people to understand. And yes, that's true. But it is still very important to put sources out there because at the end of the day, that the sources are what our faith is built on. And if it's not built on sources, if it's not built on the ancestral belief, then what faith are we actually practicing? And so sources do need to be put out there, and then it takes the extra mile of individuals to talk to people and have conversations, and whether that's one conversation or 1,000 conversations.
Right.
There is something that I wrote about faith that I would very much like to read.
Oh, yes. You sent me this, and I thought it was a perfect description of how faith works. Go ahead. Yes, read that. Absolutely.
Okay. I'll begin by listing a few sources, not very many, that are attested from our ancestors, and then I will read what I wrote. Okay, so, quote, "Fate's creations changes the world under the heavens. Fate is fully fixed. Fate is stronger and fate's measurer mighty than anyone's thoughts. The measurer controls all. No one may deny Weird's decree, however lightly spoken." All right, now I'm going to read. Those are the sources. Now I'm going to read what I wrote, and then after that we can end it or continue, whatever you deem fit. Okay, quote: "Fatalism holds that events are subjected to fate, that is, actions that are predetermined. As our sacred lore records in Voluspa 20, the Norns established laws, allotted life to the sons of men, and established Orle, that is destiny. As such, we submit ourselves to the will of the Norns, the gods, and the goddesses. The existence of fate and prophecy runs through the fabric of the Germanic religion and people, as evidenced in the poems, sagas, and myths. Therefore, we affirm that predeterminism and fate are critical to the faith. We reject notions of radical free will. Within this framework, the concept of limited free will or soft fatalism emerges from our ancient texts. In using an example of a Hennevitable game, we acknowledge the predetermined nature of the game's established rules and the limited choices we have in deciding which moves to make. However, despite these constraints, players retain a measure of limited autonomy and decision-making. They still possess the freedom to select moves and devise strategies based on their analysis of the board. While external factors and opponent moves may influence the game against our control, the choices and decisions made by the player carry significance and can shape the game's happenings, despite that the final outcome is predetermined. This exemplifies how fatalistic thought allows the interplay between predetermined parameters and outcomes and the individual's agency within the framework of Orle, or fate. End quote.
I think that description right there basically hits it out of the park. To give a little game analogy is, no pun intended, but that is perfectly described so that a individual can pretty much follow what you're talking about. And that's just and that's in your book, correct? That's in your new version of your book, correct?
Yes, that what I just quoted is in that third edition. Yes.
So I really appreciate you coming on. I'm definitely going to have you on again. There's so many more topics that we can wrestle around and delve into. One of the things that I really want to get you on the air about, and maybe you can give me a yes or no now, but I really want to talk about the misconceptions between our faith and Christianity. How about that?
Sure. I'm open to whatever you want to throw at me.
That's a pretty good discussion and a lot of debates on many of these topics, whether they're Christian or heathen influenced. So this is definitely one of the topics that I want to delve into with you on a later date. But I really appreciate coming on. Thank you again for taking the time to come on, and we'll definitely have you on again. Okay?
That sounds great. I'll be available.
I appreciate it. Hell so.
All right, holiday.